tonight, the statement by Catholic bishops that has caused some jitters with reactions flying all over the place. What did they exactly say? The economy, the SHA rollout, exam cheating, we have it all tonight. It's a mix of issues, and we have guest gangsters to help give context to the conversation. We have Wanja Maina, who's a new media expert, and former Minister Dr. Mukhisa Kitui. Thank you, both of you, for joining us. Linus and Yvonne will be back next week. Sam is here too. This is the News Gun.
We recall the pertinent and resolved issues we have raised recently with the government over taxation of Kenyans, the hiking of the missionary work permits, youth unemployment, regulations of the education system, especially the CBC and university loan scheme, the failure to constitute the IEBC, etc. This culture of lies, unkept promises, and misplaced priorities is unacceptable and needs to be dealt with.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. This statement by the Catholic bishops touched on a lot of issues, from education to health. They talked about the NHIF. They talked a bit about femicide and the abductions and the killings that we're seeing in the country. But what was interesting, other than the statement from the bishops, are the reactions that we received this evening. There was a first one which came from the Ministry of Health, with the CS of Health talking about NHIF and SHA and how payments are already being made to hospitals that owe a lot of money. Then a few minutes later, there was a statement from the Ministry of Education talking about CBC, all in reaction to what was said by the bishops. A few minutes later, there was another statement from the police on the same. And then we had the leader of a majority in the Senate, Aaron Cheriot, also speaking on one of the issues that were raised by the bishops. Then we had the majority leader in the National Assembly, Kimani Ichung'wah, also reacting to what they said. Maybe I can start with you, Dr. Kitui. Why are they so angry? Why all the reactions from the
First of all, when there's a comprehensive statement by the Catholic bishops, and government responds by asking different people, giving statements to different people to issue on behalf of government, is a statement of the collapse of central government spokesman position. Mm-hmm. The credibility of those who have been speaking on behalf of government has been lost. So they're scrambling to find alternative talking heads to try to rebut what is being said. That's one thing. But second, the bishops are not scoring points. The reaction of government to try to prove that things are not wrong is an attempt to score points, which misses the point. On all the things that were being raised, these citizens of Kenya live here. They go through it. Kenyans know and question themselves why we're having a problem of building classrooms for junior secondary, and next year we have idle Form 1 classrooms in the senior secondary schools. Who thought of these? Where did they think the resource was coming from? Kenyans know there's no infrastructure. You're talking about content-based curriculum. Teachers of content are not sufficiently trained and provided. Budgetary resources for supporting that transition is not there. Everybody knows. You are not telling parents not to believe their eyes, but to believe some person speaking in parliament on behalf of government. Related to this, you have to look at it this way.
Maybe, Wanja, if I come to you, as Dr. Kitui was saying, is the government overreacting? Should they have let this slide and try and deal with the issues instead of reacting so quickly?
Yeah, they're overreacting, fast and furious, defending the indefensible. And you know, over time, they have shown us that every time they are put on the spot, they are very efficient. I mean, if I had written a letter to ask the ministry to help me with something around insurance, I'm sure it would have gone to this office, and a lot of bureaucracies. But within 3 hours, when the Catholic spoke, over 5, government institutions had been able to write a letter to go through the authorization and the bureaucracies, and no doubt to defend themselves. One of the things that caught my attention really is the issue of abductions and the issues of the police. If the police in Kenya are saying that they are not the ones abducting people, then they should also tell us, is there another squad or another group of people who are acting as if they are in charge of security, that they are operating outside of the national security system. And if they are there, where are they? I mean, when I was reading this press statement, you know, it's actually funny that in their statement, during the protest, more police officers were injured than the wananchis. In fact, they said that 495 policemen were injured. I mean, if you look at the ratio of Kenyans to the police, for every one Kenyan, for every around 450 Kenyans, there is one policeman. So if I throw a stone, the probability of hitting a policeman is so minimal, if at all. So if you tell us that more policemen were injured than the Kenyans, I mean, you are telling us that what we were watching on TV is not what we were watching. I mean, in the age of digital media and in the age of these traditional and mainstream media. For me, I would say that, you know, when you defend the indefensible, when each and every Kenyan has an example of something that is not working. You know, Jamila, this issue of SHA, this issue of NHIF, what's in a name? Whether it's called SHA, SHE, some Gen Zs are calling it Shisha. I don't know if it's legal or not. But the issue is, health is a devolved function. Yes. So every day when I see the governors and their representatives talking that they have not received devolution money, however much you defend Shisha, Shu, how then is an individual who is at a clinic in Kajiado or Gatundu, where I come from, able to access health, yet the governors don't have the money? I mean, it just doesn't tie. I mean, for as long as they defend the indefensibles and the Kenyans are talking, I choose to believe the Kenyans.
Gituku, just before I come to you, let's listen to what the Catholic bishops said about Kenyans losing trust in government, and then we'll continue the conversation.
We have made clear statements many times in the recent past with very little response from the government. Despite the calmness we are experiencing, there is a lot of anxiety, and most people are losing trust in the government.
Gituku, most people are losing trust in the government, and they went on to try and explain why are people losing trust in the government, because they talk about all the issues of health, of security, of education, the abductions. Are people really losing trust with the government, or hapo kuna kitu ambayo hatuelewi?
I think you have to look at it from the perspective of Kenyans raise questions, the government gives an explanation, it doesn't tally with what Kenyans know to be reality. And you find it in the statement of the police themselves, because this evening they are saying that, and I read one of the paragraphs, in addition, there were 57 reported cases of missing persons, of which 22 are found alive, 6 found dead, while 29 are still unaccounted for, and serious efforts by police are underway to trace them. So these are situations that happened in the month of June and July 2024. So we're about 4 months later. They're still talking about serious efforts. Then they continue in the same paragraph to say, during the protests, the National Police Service made 1,552 arrests countrywide. The statement ends there. So what is accountability? If 1,552 people are arrested, what is the accountability for that? Where are they? How many were taken to court? How many were prosecuted? How many were discharged in court? Because if you don't say that, then what are Kenyans supposed to understand or to believe when it comes to the 29 that are still missing? And of course, even the figure of how many people died from the demonstrations or the Gen Z protests, as you may call them, the human rights organizations, including KNCHR, has been talking about a figure of more than 60. The government has stuck to a figure of about 42. So again, if these questions are unanswered, and I think I remember now Deputy President, when he was Cabinet Secretary for Interior Affairs, appearing before Parliament recently, I think it was in the month of October, if not late September, and he told the members of Parliament of the circumstances of the attack or the breach of Parliament, but also said about 42 people that were killed, saying that investigations were being undertaken, that every life lost was going to be accounted for. This has been the narrative since he appeared in this studio. I believe it was on 5th of July. He gave the same promise. As we speak, still no answers. So in as much as the government is faulting the statement of the bishops, including what the Minister of Health is saying, as the government takes great exception to the misleading, erroneous and false statement issued by the Catholic Church bishops on obligations owed by the government through the defunct NHIF. So is taking a very strong position, but at the same time, when you look at the answers that are being given, there has been so much time to give these answers. Why weren't they being given?
Why weren't the answers being given in good time, Dr. Ruto? Because Ituko has just read what one of the statesmen says, and it's almost the exact same wording. The government takes great exception to the misleading, erroneous, and false statement issued by the Catholic Church bishops. That was from the Ministry of Health. Ministry of Education. The Ministry of Education is deeply concerned about a statement by the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops issued today, particularly as it regards the education sector. Waswahili husema huwa inauma zaidi when it is something that maybe you are supposed to have done and you haven't, and someone points it out. Is it a case of now it's really as painful to them as it is because all the inadequacies are being pointed out?
I don't want to interpret the Jackney reactions.
Yes.
But I can say this. It doesn't take very much to find which side Kenyans think is telling them the truth. If the Catholic bishops are saying one thing and Ruto and his ministers are saying another thing, ask Kenyans who is lying. They have been around here for the last 2.5 years, and they know people who are cerebral liars. That's one. The second thing, let's first take the one positive thing about the Catholic Church. The church has been clouded in the way it conducted itself in the period leading to the formation of this government. And I think it's an important step in the right direction that the people of the cloth are finding the mistakes they made and they start siding with the people. So I applaud the leaders of the Catholic Church for returning to a historically important role that the church has played in standing for justice, standing with the victims of bad government. It has taken long before they came to this position, but it is good that they have come even if late. Secondly, government insulting church is not a new thing. I was involved in the second liberation, and every time they go through the rituals of saying we take exception. What exception? We know they are being told behave. We know they are messing up things. The Shisha health reforms, we said if it is working badly and you replace it with something that is working worse, what are you telling us? You cannot just impose on Kenyans decisions by fiat without even an attempt to listen to them. And the fact that you went through rituals of consultation, that you called some people in some places and got some politicians to say, oh, this is popular participation, and came back and you called it participation. That legitimizes the mistaken behavior they're having. I never knew in the democratic transition of this country that will come to a time when lies and ill-advised policy and rule by fiat will become so mainstreamed after all the sacrifices this country has made and after all the celebration that we are now a renewed country. But this is what the church is talking to them. Look at yourselves. You do not deserve to be our leaders if you continue behaving this way. If you continue finding excuses about abductions and murders. When you hear a president telling people, I have now given instruction to investigate femicide, where were you? Your primary responsibility is protection of our lives before our property. What has woken you up now to start giving instructions? Why are you denying them instructions to investigate what was going on?
Okay, yeah. On the same, can we now listen to what the church said about who is abducting people, and then we'll come to you, Wanja.
We are appalled by the blatant recurring incidents of reported abductions, disappearances, torture, and killings of Kenyans. We also decry the increasing murder of women. This has caused great consternation, anger, and disgust. Who is abducting these people? And is the government unable to stop these abductions and killings?
They're asking a pertinent question. Dr. Mukhiso was saying the government needs to start listening. After all the malalamishi that has come out of the statement by the bishops, is the government finally going to start listening to what people have been talking about? Ama ni kulalamika tu?
You know, some of these things they don't keep writing and they don't keep talking. How we will see tangible change is when your average Kenyan will go to a clinic and they are given quality health care. So, you know, like the bishop has, and I might also want to disclose that I'm a Catholic. and we know how we operate, and we know the kind of respect we owe to our senior church leaders. You know, when he asked who is abducting these people, remember just the other day in one of the leading newspapers, we were told that leading telecommunication companies have breached our privacy and the trust that we have bestowed upon them, and they are sharing our data with the bad guys. That was a big investigative piece, and you could have seen the kind of publicity those telecommunication companies engaged in. So for me, I would say that if there is that kind of breach, therefore, how sure are we that these bishops are safe? How sure are we these, activists are safe? You know, just the other day, one of our former member of parliament, Alfred Keter, there was a video that was all over social media, and you remember how Kenyans were just saying, amechukuliwa, when he was with his children. You know, you ask yourself. Coming from church. You ask yourself, if they can take a person of such a status in the society, how safe are we? Remember, Jamila, just around this time when Kenyans were feeling unsafe, there was a discovery of bodies in Mukuru, Kware. That matter has never gone to a conclusive end, because I remember there was a funny story of women. Someone has been arrested, then they ran away from the police station.
It's still hajulikani.
So when you start hearing those kind of stories, you are worried about your own life, because you don't know, what's going to happen. And if there are people who are doing these things outside of the security systems, then how safe are we, as Kenyans? So for me, I think with the government, if it's the issue of NHIF, it's just a matter of fixing it so that the Kenyans can access healthcare. If it's the issue of competency-based, curriculum, it's about assuring the student who have finished grade 8, but that by January they'll be going to school. And no, when we talk about this issue of the students who are in grade 8 now, where they'll transition to next, we're always worried about the feelings of the parent, of the unionist, the whoever. No one talks about the feelings of the children. I happen to have a sibling who is in that transition, and I can tell you that this issue is actually stressing you, the children, because traditionally they thought that they will be going to high school, and now they are told that you'll be going to grade 9. Now what they don't know is that if they'll be in primary school or they'll be in high school, and there is no clarity even with the teachers. So for your average Kenyan, you read these letters and you're like, this is a big story. You even feel like it was written by the same person, but the letterhead is different, because this tone, great exception, deeply concerned. But the issues really, the main issues, this is just a lot of defense, a lot of mathematics, but in the end you ask yourself, how does it translate to a lady who is going to give birth tomorrow and they need a mama or something to do with their healthcare? So I think those are the real issues.
Before I come to you, Gituko, I'll come back to Dr. Kitui about the statement that you released today, together with the NAC Kenya leader Martha Karua and Professor Kivutha Kibwana and former Member of Parliament Kabando on education. Yes. You talked about how the Ruto regime is mortgaging the future of the children and the youth of Kenya, and you talked about the university fund. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about that.
Okay. We have been following a crisis that was being disguised because of the prominence of the theater of Gachagua, kicking Gachagua out of government, and the scandalous engagement with Adani, which is a systematic unraveling of the education system in the country. While content-based the curricula did not start with the Ruto government, it is true that under Ruto, a lot of projected and expected public facilitation, nurturing of the transition in the education system has faltered. Capitation has become an empty slogan. Infrastructure development to accommodate massive transition from earlier primary into junior secondary and senior secondary school has not adequately been done. There's haphazardous way of recruiting and staffing teachers. There is consequences of the massive and very public stealing of exams. All of a sudden, you find that the ethnic home of a minister for education starts becoming the home of the most brilliant kids. and when they go to professional courses in university, 3/4 of them fail. It doesn't take any genius to know that this is cheating, destroying the credibility of education, and getting away with it without a warning from senior government. And you go now look at what's happening at the university. Government uses comprehensive bargaining agreements with the trade unions for staff and for academic staff as a way of avoiding a strike without any attempt or even intention to implement the CBA conditions that they have signed to. Number two, government is still living in the Stone Age things that you can twist lecturers and get your way with university. You start pretending that all is well, students will go on and have their exams without tuition and proper preparation by their lecturers, without even a clear arrangement about who is going to set and who is going to mark those exams. You just want rituals of progress, but it is a major crisis that's waiting to happen. I've been a beneficiary of a good education in this country, and I can tell you around the world, credentials and the reputation of Kenyans is very good because they are well-developed human resource. At least the foundation is made for graduate studies elsewhere to be competent academicians and professionals around the world. If you start destroying our education system and all you want to do is to score political points, say everything is all right, turn the other way when tribalism is insidiously destroying institutions. You saw how the massive demonstration that Moi University could only be led by a Kalenjin. We never had anyone to contradict that from government, and the management of Moi University was Kalenjinized. Let them show us the benefits of that Kalenjinization of Moi University. You are seeing vice chancellors of Nairobi University and Kenyatta University, when they tell government, use your heads to reason. What you're attempting is not working.
Yeah.
You start haunting them out. You start trying to replace them with talking heads that will please government but destroy the education of our children. We cannot continue sacrificing the next generation of developers, the people whose energies are going to pay pensions for my generation, by just looking the other way, while persons in government make the most ridiculous statements, and our eyes can see that things are unraveling.
Ituku?
Right. I'm looking at, excuse me, the statement by the CS for Education, Julius Migoso Gamba, and paragraph E. First, he talks about, in terms of infrastructure, the construction of 16,000 classrooms required for grade 9 is at an advanced stage. Goes ahead to say that the government has allocated a total of 17.6 billion shillings for the completion of these classrooms by December 2024. Well, this is interesting because based on the current financial year's budget, the school infrastructure was allocated some 6 billion shillings, infrastructure development in primary and secondary schools. As for a figure of 17.6 billion shillings to emerge in this statement, I mean, it's a bit surprising because 17.6 and 6 billion shillings are a bit far in between, about 11 billion shillings. But of course, we'll check to see what exactly where exactly is the 11 billion shillings coming from. And I think the Principal Secretary for Basic Education was speaking recently, I believe on Monday, when he was opening an examination container somewhere in Nakuru, if I'm not mistaken. And in as much as he spoke about the classrooms that were expected to be completed before grade 9 transition is here in January, this figure, 70.6 billion shillings, is a bit raising a bit of eyebrows. Then also the statement continues to say that the government has employed a record 56,950 teachers for junior school. A total of 46,000 intern teachers will be employed on permanent and pensionable terms by January 2025. It's important to note that of these teachers, the 56,000 include the JSS interns of 46,000. So those figures and how they are positioned, I mean, again, in terms of clarity, it's important just for the government to communicate on that, because remember the promise was that these intern teachers would be converted to permanent and pensionable at the start of this new financial year, which started in July. But of course, we've heard from the National Treasury that this is planned now for January 2025. And recently, the Teacher Service Commission advertised for recruitment of these teachers. 46,000 positions were advertised. But then again, the applications came to the tune of about 314,000, slightly more than 300,000 applications. So it tells you this sort of situation that you're in the education sector. But again, also to say that the introduction of the student-centered funding model followed recommendations by the Working Party, and saying that 70 billion shillings is the worth of debts that universities had accrued. I mean, it is very clear that there has been challenges with this university funding model. You remember that in the conversations that we've had, including early September, it was very difficult for government officials to even communicate on some of these policies. And as we speak, I think there's something, a process going on in court. Yes. At the same time, you have teams that have been appointed by the President and the Minister of Education to go ahead and look into how to make it better. So in as much as the government will be aggrieved by the statement raised by the Catholic bishops, as well as the political class, also including Dr. Mukise Kitui here, there's reality that is on the ground, that we have done stories of university students who do not even know what they've been doing in school, because they cleared their Form 4 examination last year, sometime in November, early December. The results came out. They were called to join universities. The process of calling them to those universities was quite confusing, because their letters of offer were actually withdrawn. Then eventually they were told that this is your band, this is the amount of money that you should pay, this is the amount of money that your scholarship will be, and this is the match that the loan will be. Then there's a court order, and then the government says that we're working to revise this program, but writing to university vice chancellors to allow learners to join universities and study. Then you have the lecturer strike that has not been resolved as we speak. I mean, I don't think there's a worse time to be a university student in Kenya.
There is something I just wanted to add to that, which we did mention in our press conference today. When there is conservatory orders from a judge, Justice Chacha Mwita, staying the implementation of a new program.
Yes.
The rational thing to do is to maintain the status quo. You continue with financing education the way you are doing before you attempted to introduce the new system. What government has done is to partially ignore the conservatory orders from the judge, but at the same time, to refuse continuing the status quo in financing education through the student-own contribution, the capitation program, the higher education loan board. They just tell students, okay, you'll have to come up with some money, and you have exams on such and such a date, and unless you bring this money, you cannot sit those exams. The pain of it is this. The children of the poor are the most vulnerable and incapable of finding some spare money somewhere to pay in order to sit exams. So if you started off by talking about, like KK did in their propaganda campaign before the election, that they are having a transformation of education to make all the children equal in the country, they are presiding over a system which is entrenching inequality in access to an education under very many difficult circumstances. And circumstances of ignoring court rulings, circumstances of punishing the poor by not reverting to the status quo while you are trying to prosecute the court conservatory orders to see what is the outcome of that. And this is just putting political ego ahead of common sense.
And speaking on the same, we had university students who actually are basically stranded right now because lecturers are not in class, because promises that had been made were not kept. The lecturers went on strike in September. There was an agreement that was signed. They went back to work. But then after that, they were ignored and they're on strike. And one of the students was telling us some of those who are totally and completely affected, the first-year students who joined university sometime in August. This is now November. Some of them have not even had a single lesson because as soon as they joined, lecturers went on strike. They came back for another week, and the lecturers went on strike again. So there are a lot of dicey issues in there in terms of what was working, was okay, it wasn't broken. So why are you trying to fix it? And I think the same situation is what's happening in the health sector, because NHIF had been there for almost 60 years. Yes, it had challenges, but there were aspects of it that were working. So why overhaul it completely? And this discussion has come up several times, and introduce something that seems to have been harried in terms of its implementation, and that's why there are so many challenges being faced. We're going to take a short break, ladies and gentlemen, and then when we come back, we're going to continue the discussion on what has transpired today. You're watching The News Gang. We'll be right back.